Sometimes the people we love most don't just break our hearts. They teach us what silence really means. The morning light poured softly into the coastal home of Eleanor Hayes, a 71-year-old widow with calm eyes that still held the warmth of a woman who once loved deeply. The ocean outside whispered against the rocks, just as it did when her late husband Thomas used to sit beside her, promising they'd grow old together. Her phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made her smile for a moment. Claire, her only daughter. "Good morning, sweetheart," Eleanor said. "Morning, Mom," came the quick reply. "Listen, I just wanted to tell you I sold the beach house." The words landed like cold rain. Eleanor froze. "Sold it? But that was your father's." "Yes, I know," Claire interrupted. "It's been empty for years. Taxes were crazy. I also sold Dad's truck. It was rusting in the garage." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the phone. "Claire, those weren't just things." "Mom, please. You keep living in memories. We need to be practical. I'll send you what's left from the sale." The silence stretched. Eleanor finally whispered, "If that's what you think is best, dear." "Love you, Mom," Claire said, already half distracted. "Love you too," Eleanor answered, but the words felt empty. When the call ended, the phone slipped from her hand onto the floor. Outside, the wind rose, scattering dry leaves across the porch. Inside, Eleanor stared at the faded photo of Thomas, standing beside the old truck that was now gone. "You were right, Thomas," she murmured. "Love isn't always enough." She sat there for a long time, surrounded by the quiet hum of the sea. But something inside her didn't break. It shifted. What if the woman who had been betrayed wasn't as powerless as everyone thought? Days passed in silence. She moved through the house like a shadow, touching walls that carried echoes of laughter, now replaced by distance. When she reached for tea in the kitchen, her hand brushed against something tucked between old recipe cards, a sealed envelope. Her heart stilled. The handwriting, she recognized it instantly. Thomas. On the front, in his familiar script, it read, "For my dear Eleanor, if ever our daughter forgets what matters." Her hands shook as she tore it open. Inside lay a letter and a small silver key. "My Ellie, if you're reading this, it means time has done what I feared. Made our daughter forget what truly holds value. Don't be angry. You have something she doesn't. Patience, wisdom, and truth. And truth, my love, never fades." She pressed the letter to her chest. "I left a second set of documents with Mr. Bennett, my attorney. Not everything I built is gone. Not everything can be sold. There's more waiting for you, something only you can claim. Use it when your heart tells you to." Eleanor's eyes filled. She looked at the silver key glinting softly in her palm. "You planned this, didn't you, Thomas?" she whispered. "You always did see what I couldn't." She stared out the window where the waves broke gently on the rocks. Everything she thought she had lost, maybe it wasn't gone after all. That night, she dialed the number written at the bottom of the letter. "Mr. Bennett speaking." "Mr. Bennett, this is Eleanor Hayes. My husband left me a letter. He said you'd understand." A pause, then a slow breath on the other end. "Ah, Mrs. Hayes, I was wondering when you might call. Your husband was a remarkable man. I've kept something for you all these years, just as he asked." Eleanor's voice trembled. "Something?" "Documents, deeds, accounts in your name, untouched. He wanted them hidden until the time was right." Her lips parted in disbelief. Thomas had known this day would come. "He said," Bennett added softly, "when your daughter forgets what love means, you must remember what strength is." Eleanor sat in the stillness, the letter trembling between her fingers. The ache in her heart began to fade, replaced by a quiet resolve. "All right, Thomas," she whispered. "Let's finish what you started." She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The truth her husband left behind would change everything. Not just for her, but for everyone who had underestimated the power of a silent heart. Subscribe to my channel Voices of Auntie Polo for more powerful stories like this. The next morning, Eleanor stood outside the modest law office downtown. The sign read Bennett & Co. in gold letters that had faded with time. She clutched Thomas's letter in one hand and the small silver key in the other. When she entered, an older gentleman with kind eyes rose from his desk. Mrs. Hayes, he said with a gentle smile, you haven't changed much since I last saw you. She gave a faint smile. You're too kind, Mr. Bennet. Thomas said you'd know what to do. He nodded and reached for a file from his cabinet, thick, sealed, and marked with her husband's handwriting. Your husband was very deliberate. He said this should only go to you, not a day sooner, not a person earlier. Eleanor sat as Mr. Bennet opened the file. Inside were bank documents, property papers, and a letter in Thomas's handwriting. Thomas, you clever man, she whispered. The letter read, Ellie, I know your heart will be broken by what happens after I'm gone. I can't stop the pain, but I can make sure you're never powerless. The account you'll find here holds everything Claire could not take, because it was never hers to claim. It belongs to you and to the peace you'll rebuild. Mr. Bennet looked up. He left you nearly everything from his private trust, the beach cottage, an investment account, and this. He opened a small velvet pouch and placed a silver locket on the table. Inside was a tiny photo, Thomas smiling with a baby Claire in his arms. Eleanor's fingers trembled. He never stopped believing in her, she said softly. No, Bennet replied. He just wanted her to remember the meaning of love. As she left the office, the autumn wind carried the scent of salt and pine. She looked at the key once more and whispered, You've given me more than money, Thomas. You've given me purpose. Weeks passed. Eleanor began to restore the small beach cottage Thomas had loved. It was peaceful there, just her, the waves, and the gulls calling overhead. But news traveled fast in their small town. Claire soon found out about her mother's new life. One evening, Eleanor's phone rang again. Mom, Claire's voice was sharp. Why didn't you tell me about Dad's other estate? I had to hear from Mr. Bennet's office. Eleanor sighed. Because, Claire, your father wanted it that way. That's not fair, Claire snapped. I'm his daughter. I deserve. Eleanor's tone turned firm, calm, unshaken. You sold your father's memories, Claire. You said love doesn't pay the bills. I think you already got what you wanted. For the first time, Claire had no words. The silence on the line spoke louder than anything. Eleanor hung up slowly, her heart heavy but steady. She walked to the window where the sea stretched endlessly. The reflection of the setting sun painted her face in gold. She whispered to herself, sometimes silence is the only language that truth understands. That night, she opened the locket again and smiled faintly. She'll come around, Thomas, just like you said. Maybe not today, but someday. And somewhere deep inside, she believed it. The tides were changing, not just for Eleanor, but for Claire too. Life had a quiet way of teaching lessons, one wave at a time. Subscribe to my channel, Voices of Auntie Polo, for more powerful stories like this. The days turned into months, and the beach cottage slowly transformed. Fresh paint, new curtains, a small vegetable patch by the fence, everything Eleanor touched began to carry her quiet strength. She didn't need much. Mornings were for tea and letters to Thomas that she never mailed. Evenings were for listening to the waves and watching the horizon fade into violet light. But her heart, once bruised and heavy, was growing lighter. One afternoon, she stopped by the local grocery store. As she walked through the aisles, people smiled and greeted her, something that hadn't happened in years. Word of her calm resilience had spread. Mrs. Hayes, said the shopkeeper, it's good to see you smiling again. Eleanor returned the smile. It's good to feel like myself again. Outside, the wind lifted her hair as she walked to her car. She noticed a young couple arguing near the parking lot. Frustration, pride, misunderstanding. For a brief second, she saw a reflection of her own past, of words once said in anger that could never be taken back. That night, she sat by her window, writing another letter she'd never send. Dear Thomas, I finally understand what you meant when you said silence can be powerful. It doesn't mean weakness. It means choosing peace over noise. You were right. I needed to lose everything to find what really matters. She set down her pen and looked at the ocean, the same ocean that had watched her weep and now watched her rebuild. Claire, meanwhile, was beginning to crumble under her own choices. The new house she bought after selling her father's property felt cold and empty. The luxuries she once admired no longer comforted her. Every time she looked at her reflection, she saw someone she barely recognized. Late one night, Claire scrolled through her phone and stopped at an old photo, her parents on their anniversary, laughing freely. A wave of guilt washed over her. For the first time, she missed her mother. Not the mother she'd ignored in favor of convenience, but the woman who had always stood by her no matter what. A few days later, she received a small envelope in the mail. The return address read simply, Coastal Lane. Inside was a photo of the beach cottage, newly painted, bright, alive, and a note in Eleanor's handwriting. Claire, the door is never locked. It never has been. Some things can be fixed, but only if you want to. Claire stared at the note for a long time. No anger, no guilt trip, just a simple truth. Tears filled her eyes. For years, she'd blamed her mother for being old-fashioned, too sentimental, too quiet. But now, that silence felt like grace. That evening, she sat in her car for nearly an hour before driving to the beach. The same road she used to take as a child stretched before her, familiar yet strange. When she arrived, the sky was deep orange, the sea calm. She saw her mother sitting by the porch, knitting something white and soft. Eleanor looked up and smiled gently. "You came." Claire hesitated, her voice cracking. "I wasn't sure if you'd want me to." Eleanor set the yarn aside. "I always did." "I'm sorry, Mom," Claire whispered. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought love was just something that came and went." Eleanor reached out, her hand warm and steady. "Love doesn't go anywhere, Claire. People do. But it waits. It always waits." For the first time in years, Claire fell into her mother's arms, trembling, crying, forgiving herself. The sea roared softly in the distance, as if it too was exhaling after a long storm. The days that followed were slow, gentle, and almost healing. Claire started visiting more often, bringing groceries, helping in the garden, sitting quietly beside her mother on the porch without needing to fill the silence. It was strange, she thought, how the same quiet that once made her restless now gave her peace. One evening, as they watched the tide come in, Claire turned to her mother. "I've been thinking about selling my apartment. It doesn't feel like home anymore." Eleanor smiled faintly. "A house becomes a home only when you can breathe inside it." Claire nodded, eyes glistening. "You're right." But life, as it often does, wasn't done teaching her. A few weeks later, Claire received a notice from the bank. One of her trusted business partners had drained her investment account. Her funds were gone. She stared at the letter in disbelief, her hands trembling. The irony was sharp. The very greed that once made her betray her parents had found its way back to her. That night, she drove to the cottage again. Eleanor was reading by the fire when she arrived. Claire stood in the doorway, shaking. Eleanor looked up, immediately sensing the change. "What happened, dear?" "I lost everything. The business, the money, all of it. It's gone." For a moment, the only sound was the fire crackling between them. Then Eleanor rose and walked to her daughter. "Then maybe it's time you stop measuring life by what you lose," she said softly. Claire broke down. "How do you do that? How do you stay calm through everything?" Eleanor smiled, not with pride, but with quiet understanding. "Because I already lost everything once, Claire, and I learned that peace is the only thing worth keeping." She guided her daughter to sit by the fire, the warmth of the room wrapped around them. Outside, the waves whispered like an old friend. That night, Claire stayed in the guest room, the same one she'd slept in as a teenager. The walls still held traces of her old posters, her old laughter, but now everything felt different, smaller, humbler, and somehow more real. When she woke up the next morning, she found her mother already in the garden, barefoot in the dew, humming an old tune Thomas used to love. "Mom," Claire called softly. Eleanor turned, smiling. "You should eat. There's breakfast on the table." Claire joined her, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a guest. She felt like she'd come home. Later that afternoon, while helping Eleanor clean the attic, Claire stumbled upon an old wooden box. It was carved with initials she recognized instantly. TH. "What's this?" she asked. Eleanor paused. Thomas's keepsake box. I never opened it after he passed. I thought it was just old papers. But when they lifted the lid, inside lay a sealed envelope marked, "For the day our daughter understands." It's for me? Eleanor's eyes softened. It seems so. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a short note in Thomas's familiar handwriting. My little girl, if you're reading this, it means life has taught you what I couldn't. Wealth fades, anger fades, but kindness, that's the one thing that survives us. Take care of your mother and take care of your heart. They're both more fragile than you think. Claire pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. He knew, she whispered. He always knew. Eleanor gently placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Your father had faith in you, even when you didn't. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the cottage in amber light, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, quiet peace. For the first time, she understood what her mother had been trying to teach her all along. Love isn't about possession. It's about presence. The next morning was calm and gray, the kind of quiet that carried both comfort and tension. Eleanor sat on the porch, knitting with steady hands. Claire joined her, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. For a long time, neither spoke. The waves rolled in, slow and patient. Finally, Claire broke the silence. Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Eleanor looked up, waiting. I wasn't just careless before, Claire said quietly. I was cruel. I said things I can't take back. I treated you like a burden when all you ever did was love me. Eleanor's knitting paused. She set the yarn aside and looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. The same face she'd kissed as a child. The same eyes that once sparkled with curiosity and laughter. Claire, she said gently, we all lose our way sometimes. What matters is that you found yours again. But I don't deserve your forgiveness, Claire whispered. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, Eleanor replied. It's something you give, so both hearts can rest. Claire's eyes filled with tears. How do you still have so much love left in you? Eleanor smiled faintly. Because love isn't something I ran out of. It's something I learned to protect. They sat together in silence again. The breeze carried the scent of salt and wildflowers. For the first time, the distance between them was gone. After a while, Eleanor stood and walked inside. When she returned, she carried a small velvet pouch, the same one Mr. Bennet had given her months ago. This was your father's, she said, placing it in Claire's hand. He wanted you to have it when the time was right. Claire opened the pouch and found the silver locket inside. She traced the outline of her parents' faces in the tiny photograph. You kept this all these years? Of course, Eleanor said softly. Some memories deserve to stay close to the heart. Claire held the locket tightly. I want to make it right, Mom. I don't just mean saying sorry. I mean really making things better. For us. Eleanor nodded, eyes misting. Then start by being here. Not in the past, not in guilt, just here. Claire smiled through her tears. I can do that. That evening, as the sky turned rose gold, Claire cooked dinner, her father's favorite stew, using the old recipe card she found tucked behind the letterbox. The smell filled the cottage, warm and familiar. They ate quietly, exchanging small smiles, stories, and memories. Eleanor laughed for the first time in a long while, a soft, pure sound that made Claire's chest ache in the best way. When dinner was done, Eleanor said, You know, Thomas always believed that people change only when life teaches them softly first and harshly later if they don't listen. Claire nodded. He was right, I didn't listen, but now I hear everything. Eleanor reached over and took her daughter's hand. Then let that be enough. They sat together until the stars appeared, the sound of the sea whispering its endless rhythm. For the first time, Claire didn't feel haunted by what she'd done. She felt grateful that her mother was still here, that there was still time to rebuild, that forgiveness could be as real as pain. The night stretched on, quiet and full of understanding. The next morning came with soft light pouring through the kitchen window. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air. Eleanor moved slowly, humming a tune Thomas once loved. Claire was sorting through a drawer, trying to help tidy up the old cottage. She lifted a stack of old books and paused. There, hidden beneath them, was another envelope. It was sealed with a faint red wax mark, the same kind Thomas used years ago. "Mom," she said, turning the envelope over, "there's something here." Eleanor looked up, her breath catching for a moment. "Let me see." On the front, in that same steady handwriting, it read, "For both of you, when silence becomes peace." They sat at the small kitchen table. Eleanor carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "My dearest Ellie and Claire, if this letter has found you together, then my heart is full, wherever I am." Claire felt her throat tighten. Eleanor read on. "Life is never about who's right or wrong or who wins an argument. It's about how much love survives the distance between two people. I never wanted wealth to divide you. I only wanted love to bring you back." Eleanor's voice wavered. She took a deep breath and continued reading. "Claire, I knew you'd stumble. We all do. But I also knew you'd return. Not for what I left, but for who you left behind. Ellie, thank you for being the quiet strength of this family. You were always the light in the storm." Claire closed her eyes. "He really knew us," she whispered. At the bottom of the letter was one final line. "There's a small safe beneath the old cedar chest. Inside you'll find something that belongs to both of you. Use it well, not for comfort, but for kindness." They exchanged a look, then hurried to the living room. Beneath the cedar chest, just as the letter said, was a small safe. The silver key Thomas had left months ago fit perfectly. Inside was a small envelope and a check made out to both their names, a sum larger than either expected. But the true treasure was the note beside it. "This isn't an inheritance, it's a seed. Plant it where hearts need healing." Claire stared at the words. "He didn't just want us to have peace," she said softly. "He wanted us to give it." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Then that's what we'll do." Months later, the old beach cottage had a new addition, a small community library and reading corner by the sea, open to anyone who needed warmth, quiet, or company. On its front door, a wooden sign read, "The Hayes Haven, a place for stories, love, and second chances." Children came to read, older folks came to talk, and sometimes people simply sat by the window to watch the sea. The same sea that had once carried so much grief now reflected peace. Claire often looked out at the water and whispered, "We did it, Dad, just like you wanted." Eleanor would smile beside her. "He's proud, you know." "I know," Claire said softly. "I feel him here every day." As the sun sank low, painting the sky in soft gold, the two women sat together. No words, no distance, no regrets. The sea hummed quietly in the background, and the breeze carried the faint echo of a man's laughter, as if Thomas himself was smiling somewhere beyond the horizon. Sometimes the loudest love story isn't the one that begins with passion, it's the one that ends in peace. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like the video. It helps these stories reach more people who need them. Share it with someone who believes in love, forgiveness, and second chances. And if you'd like to hear more stories that speak to the heart, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Polo and join our growing family of listeners who find strength in every story. Because sometimes a voice can heal more than silence ever could.